Picture this. You're 19 years old, carrying 70 pounds of liquid fire on your back, and you have exactly 4 minutes to live. That was the brutal reality for the 380 flamethrower operators who stepped onto the black volcanic beaches of Iwo Jima in February 1945. Only 18 would make it home alive. They were called the Devils with Fire by both their enemies and their own comrades. Heroes and monsters wrapped into one terrifying package. But the real story of these forgotten warriors goes far deeper than the flames they wielded. The strategic nightmare, why Iwo Jima became hell on Earth. Before we step into the fire, it's important to see why this tiny island, just 8 square miles of black volcanic rock, became one of the most valuable and deadliest pieces of land in World War II. By early 1945, American B-29 bombers were hammering Japanese cities, flying long 1,500-mile missions from the Mariana Islands. But in their path stood Iwo Jima, like a deadly roadblock. From there, Japanese radar tracked every American plane, sending warnings to fighter pilots. Even worse, Japanese fighters launched from the island, attacking bombers on their way back. Planes that were often damaged, running out of fuel, and easy targets. Every day the island stayed in Japanese hands. More American airmen were lost. The US had no choice. Iwo Jima had to be taken, no matter the price. For Japan, the stakes were just as clear. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, a skilled commander who had studied in America, was given an impossible order: defend Iwo Jima to the death. He knew he couldn't win. His mission was to hold out as long as possible and make the Americans pay in blood for every step forward. The island was doomed, but so was he, and that made the coming battle one of the most brutal of the Pacific War. The underground fortress, Japan's masterstroke. What the Americans didn't know was that Iwo Jima had been turned into a fortress, unlike anything seen before in the Pacific. For 8 long months, 22,000 Japanese soldiers and Korean laborers dug into the island's soft volcanic rock, creating a hidden world underground. It was like an ant farm from hell. 11 miles of tunnels connected 1,500 rooms, command posts, storage areas, even hospitals. Some bunkers were buried 75 feet deep, safe from the Navy's biggest guns. The tunnels had ventilation, escape routes, and enough supplies to last for months. But the real brilliance was in the strategy. General Kuribayashi had studied past battles and realized surface defenses were useless. So he did the unthinkable. He abandoned the beaches. The plan was simple but deadly. Let the Marines land, let them crowd the shores, then unleash fire from hidden positions. The entire island itself had become a weapon. February 19th, 1945. The trap springs. On the morning of February 19th, 1945, the first Marines stepped onto the beaches of Iwo Jima. At first, it seemed almost too simple. For nearly an hour, there was no gunfire, no enemy in sight. Only the slow, painful walk through soft black sand that dragged at their boots and trapped their vehicles. Some Marines later admitted it felt strange, like walking into a church moments before the music begins. Then General Kuribayashi gave the signal. In an instant, the island erupted. Hidden guns, mortars, and machine guns opened fire all at once, unleashing a storm of steel. The Marines were trapped in the open, packed tight on the beaches with no cover. The very sand beneath them betrayed them, too loose to dig foxholes. Men scraped with helmets, but the holes collapsed. Within minutes, the landing became a massacre. Still, the Marines pushed forward, step by bloody step. That's when the nightmare truly began. The underground war, when conventional weapons failed. The Japanese defenses on Iwo Jima were more than bunkers. They were a ghost army. Marines would blast a position with grenades and explosives, move past it, and then suddenly find Japanese soldiers firing from behind. The underground tunnels let defenders slip under the battlefield and reappear in cleared areas, turning every step forward into a trap. Normal tactics didn't work. How do you fight an enemy who can vanish into the earth and strike from anywhere? The answer seemed to lie in the concrete pillboxes scattered across the island. These were no simple bunkers. Built with 8 feet of reinforced concrete, they could take direct hits from tanks and battleships. Their firing slits overlapped, forcing Marines to face multiple angles at once. Grenades barely worked. Zigzag designs and hidden chambers deflected blasts. Nothing seemed enough. Bazookas failed. Tank shells failed. To finish the job, the Marines needed something unstoppable. They needed fire. The weapon of last resort, understanding the M2A1 flamethrower. The M2A1 flamethrower was 68 pounds on a man's back. 2 tanks held 4.7 gallons of thickened gasoline. A napalm mix that stuck to everything and burned at 2,000 degrees Celsius. A center tank held compressed nitrogen to push fuel through a 6-foot wand to an igniter. What made it terrifying were the limits. Range was only 20 to 30 yards, and a full load gave 7 to 10 seconds of flame. An operator had to get close enough to throw a grenade, use those seconds well, then try to get back alive. Napalm didn't just burn. It clung to skin and clothes and kept burning. Screams of burned men filled the air. Even disciplined Japanese troops often panicked at fire. But the flamethrower also endangered its user. One bullet, a gust of wind, or a malfunction could turn the operator into a torch. Carrying 68 pounds made you an obvious target. The men who carried fire, profiles in courage and terror. Who were the men who carried these terrible weapons? Most were young volunteers, tempted by extra pay and the chance for special training. Many were barely out of high school. Boys from farms in Iowa, factories in Detroit, or fishing boats in Massachusetts. What they all shared was the courage to carry death on their backs and deliver it face to face. Private First Class Robert Dunlap from Illinois remembered his first battle with a flamethrower. You could smell them burning. You could hear them screaming. But you couldn't stop. Your squad was counting on you. If you didn't clear that bunker, your friends were going to die. The cost wasn't just physical. It scarred their minds. Unlike other weapons, flamethrowers forced men to see the faces of those they killed, to hear their cries and smell the flesh. Many suffered what we now call PTSD. Though back then, they were told to just endure. Sergeant Mike Strank called them the bravest men, walking into hell so others could live. The 4-minute war, why flamethrower operators died so fast. One of the most chilling facts about flamethrower operators is this. Their average life expectancy in combat was just 4 minutes. Not hours, not days, minutes. Why so short? The moment a Marine with a heavy 3-tank pack appeared, every Japanese soldier aimed at him. They knew exactly what would happen if he got close. Rifles, machine guns, mortars, even artillery were all turned on the man carrying fire. The job itself made survival almost impossible. To use the weapon, operators had to be out in the open, in full view. They had to get close, often within a few yards, moving slowly under the crushing 68-pound load. They couldn't fire on the move, couldn't run, and had no way to defend themselves. Even if they reached their target and fired, the bright stream of flame gave away their position instantly. An operator might succeed in destroying a bunker, only to be hunted the moment the fire died. Captured alive, a fate worse than death. For flamethrower operators, capture was often worse than death. While Japanese soldiers usually treated prisoners by the rules of war, they made a brutal exception for men with flamethrowers, seeing them as inhuman. Many were executed on the spot or tortured first. One case was Marine Private Danny Williams, whose weapon failed near a cave. He was dragged inside, and for 3 days his squad heard his screams but couldn't save him. When they finally took the cave, what they found scarred them forever. Operators knew this risk. Many carried extra grenades, determined never to be taken alive. Innovation under fire. The wet burst technique. Desperation breeds innovation, and Iwo Jima's hell gave rise to a technique. The wet burst, credited to Sergeant Tony Jacobs. Jacobs learned to spray unlit napalm into a bunker, then follow with a lit burst. The wet napalm soaked the area, spreading into corners and tunnels. When the second, ignited blast hit, the result was sudden and total. Defenders were trapped by fire they thought had failed. The method needed perfect timing and bravery. Operators stayed exposed longer and risked more. But the shock and spread of fire made the wet burst a standard tactic for the rest of the war. The flame tanks, when infantry wasn't enough. By March 1945, Marine losses on Iwo Jima had climbed to terrifying levels. The infantry alone couldn't keep pushing forward. The answer came with the M4A3R3 flame tanks, Sherman tanks modified to carry flamethrowers instead of their main guns. These steel beasts carried 300 gallons of thickened fuel and could send fire streams up to 150 yards. Regular tank crews volunteered to drive them, fully aware they were sitting inside rolling bombs. The tanks quickly proved their worth. Positions that had held out for days fell within minutes under a wave of fire. Japanese soldiers, who had fought bravely against bombs and bullets, often broke in panic when the tanks opened up. Yet the danger was just as real for the crews. The moment a flame tank fired, it became the #1 target. Anti-tank guns, artillery, even suicide attackers focused on them. As Tank Sergeant Bill Morrison explained, "Every shot could make us fireballs. But without us, Marines would have died by the hundreds." The hidden cost, living with fire. The physical toll of flamethrower duty was recorded in numbers. Wounded, killed, missing, all carefully counted. But the mental scars were left in silence. Marines who carried flamethrowers came home with invisible wounds that never truly healed. Decades later, psychologist Dr. Patricia Richardson studied veterans of World War II and found something striking. Flamethrower operators suffered far higher rates of depression, anxiety, and what we now call PTSD than other infantrymen. The reason was clear. They fought face to face, watched men burn, heard the screams, and knew they had delivered one of the most brutal deaths imaginable. Many never spoke of it. Some drowned memories in alcohol, others withdrew completely. Too many ended their own lives. Private Robert Chen, one of only 18 survivors, avoided fire of any kind after the war. Even the smell of gasoline triggered hours of panic. As he put it, "Some wars never end. They just move inside your head." The turning point, how fire won the battle. By early March 1945, the mix of infantry flamethrowers and flame tanks finally began to shift the battle. Japanese strongholds that once seemed unbreakable were collapsing. Their tunnel system, once their greatest strength, became a trap as Marines pumped fire into cave mouths. The key moment came at Hill 382, the island's toughest position. After days of failed assaults, Marine Lieutenant-Colonel Robert Gaylor launched a massive attack, 12 flame tanks and 36 flamethrower teams working together. At dawn, they struck from multiple sides, fire pouring everywhere. For the first time, Japanese soldiers broke and retreated. Hill 382 fell, and the defense began to collapse. Legacy of the fire warriors. The 380 flamethrower operators who landed on Iwo Jima changed the way war was fought forever. Their courage and deadly new tactics shaped battles not only in World War II, but later in Vietnam and beyond. Yet their real legacy is not just in strategy. It is in the questions they leave us with. Can someone stay human while carrying fire as a weapon? What is the true price of victory when young men are asked to do the unthinkable? And how do we honor warriors who did terrible things, not out of cruelty, but because it was the only way to win? Only 18 of those men survived. They lived as heroes, but also carried the weight of what they had done. They saved thousands of American lives, but they themselves paid a cost that can never be measured. Today, as war becomes more distant and high-tech, their story reminds us of a time when battle was face-to-face, when soldiers looked directly into the eyes of their enemies. The black sands of Iwo Jima are quiet now, but the fire these men carried still burns in memory. They were the devils with fire, and they won the battle that had to be won.